Marcus Williams walked quietly through the dimming light of sunset, his German Shepherd Max padding faithfully beside him. The neighborhood park was nearly empty at this hour, just how he liked it. After 15 years of Special Forces operations and training other operators, peaceful moments like these helped quiet the memories that still haunted him. He adjusted his simple civilian clothes, jeans and a weathered leather jacket, touching the small photo in his pocket. His daughter's smile in that picture reminded him why he'd finally retired, why he'd chosen this quiet life in suburbia. Max's ears suddenly perked up, and Marcus felt the shift in the air before he heard them. 5 men emerged from behind the park's maintenance building, spread out in a practiced formation that Marcus recognized instantly. Their swagger, their practiced movements. These weren't just random thugs. They'd done this before. "Hey boy, you're in the wrong neighborhood," the apparent leader called out, a metal bat tapping against his leg. "This is our park." Marcus kept walking, his voice calm but firm. "Evening, gentlemen. My dog and I are just passing through." Max stayed perfectly heel, but Marcus could feel the shepherd's muscles tensing. "Ready." "That's a nice dog," another man sneered, fingering something in his pocket. "Too nice for someone like you." Marcus makes a calculated decision to stop his forward movement and slowly turn to face the aggressors. This deliberate action demonstrates his extensive military background. A core tenet of combat training is to never turn your back on a potential threat. The slow, measured turn serves two purposes. It keeps him tactically aware of all participants while also presenting a non-threatening posture in one final attempt to prevent violence. The narrative reveals that Marcus's 15 years of combat experience is actively processing the tactical situation around him. His trained mind is automatically calculating critical factors: the distance between each attacker, their body language and potential weapons, escape routes, environmental hazards and advantages, the position of his dog Max in the overall geometry of the confrontation. This instant battlefield assessment is ingrained in his muscle memory from countless similar situations in his military career, though under very different circumstances. Despite his combat instincts screaming at him to take immediate action, Marcus makes the conscious choice to attempt de-escalation. When he says, "I don't want any trouble," his quiet tone comes not from fear, but from the controlled confidence of someone intimately familiar with violence, who chooses to avoid it whenever possible. This restraint speaks volumes about his character. He's not looking to prove himself or engage in unnecessary conflict. The poignant moment comes when Marcus appeals to their shared nationality, stating, "We're all Americans here." This line carries particular weight given the racial motivation of his attackers. Despite facing overt racism, Marcus tries to bridge the divide by reminding them of their common ground. It's a reflection of his dedication to the country he served, even when confronted by citizens who show him nothing but prejudice. His warning about regret isn't a threat, but a genuine attempt to prevent what he knows could be a devastating confrontation. The gang leader's response marks the point of no return in the confrontation. By mockingly suggesting Marcus must have been a cook in the military, he reveals both his racist presumptions and his fatal underestimation of Marcus's capabilities. The act of spitting on the ground is a universal sign of disrespect, and when coupled with his command to teach this liar a lesson, it serves as the final closure to any possibility of peaceful resolution. The tragic irony is that they are about to learn exactly how truthful Marcus was about his service, though the lesson will come in a form they hadn't anticipated. As the crucial pivot point of the story, establishing that the violence that follows isn't born from Marcus's aggression or desire for conflict, but rather from his adversary's refusal to accept his multiple attempts at peaceful resolution. It transforms what follows from mere action into justified self-defense, with Marcus having exhausted every reasonable alternative before being forced to demonstrate his capabilities. When the attackers make their move, Marcus experiences that familiar combat state where everything seems to slow down. This isn't a supernatural ability, but rather his brain and body shifting into a heightened state of awareness that comes from years of training and real-world combat experience. His senses are hyper-focused, processing every detail of the unfolding situation with practiced precision. The text reveals that Marcus's transition into combat mode is automatic and fluid, drawing upon thousands of hours of practice. This refers not just to his military training, but to countless real-world operations, where these skills meant the difference between life and death. In this moment, he's not consciously thinking about what to do. His body is responding with ingrained muscle memory, his mind automatically cataloging threats, distances, and angles just as he would have done in countless military operations around the world. The description of the first attacker's bat swing as being telegraphed a mile away shows the vast gulf in combat experience between Marcus and his attackers. To his trained eye, their movements are amateur and predictable. His response, stepping inside the swing and targeting nerve clusters, demonstrates both his superior training and his restraint. He's not using lethal force. Instead, he's choosing to neutralize the threat with minimal permanent damage. This speaks to his character and professional discipline. The scene takes special note of Max, Marcus's German shepherd, responding to silent commands drilled over years. This detail reveals another layer of Marcus's military background, likely suggesting experience as a handler of military working dogs. The description of Max moving like a black shadow to guard his flank shows that the dog isn't acting aggressively or emotionally, but rather with the same professional precision as his handler. They're operating as a trained team, with Max instinctively moving to protect Marcus's vulnerable spots and create a more complete defensive position. What makes this section particularly powerful is its economy of movement and description. The technical language used, terms like telegraphed and nerve clusters, suggest deep knowledge of combat tactics without sensationalizing the violence. Marcus isn't showing off or trying to teach anyone a lesson. He's simply responding with the minimum force necessary to protect himself and his dog, displaying the kind of efficiency that comes only from real combat experience. The scene also subtly demonstrates the irony of the situation. These attackers, who chose Marcus as a target because of their racist assumptions, have inadvertently picked a fight with someone whose combat skills have been honed in the most demanding military operations. Their prejudice has led them to severely underestimate their target, a mistake that many of America's enemies have made to their detriment. Marcus's movements as a brutal symphony of efficiency. This metaphor is particularly apt because it suggests both the fluid grace of his actions and their devastating effectiveness. Like a well-composed piece of music, every movement has its purpose. Every strike, its precise timing. The word brutal contrasts with symphony to remind us that despite the technical precision, this is still a violent encounter with real consequences. When the text mentions that Marcus wasn't fighting to kill, those skills he kept locked away, it reveals a crucial aspect of his character. Despite possessing lethal combat abilities from his special forces training, he consciously chooses to use less than lethal techniques. His use of joint locks and pressure points demonstrates both his extensive martial arts training and his moral restraint. He's not looking to seriously harm these men, despite their clear intent to harm him. This shows Marcus as someone who has mastered not just the physical aspects of combat, but also the ethical responsibilities that come with such capabilities. When the gang leader, watching his men fall, draws a knife. This moment is particularly telling because it shows the complete reversal of power dynamics. The leader's shaking hand reveals his dawning realization. What he thought would be an easy victim has turned out to be something entirely different. The fear replacing his previous bravado indicates he's finally recognizing the quiet lethality in Marcus's eyes, the look that experienced combat veterans carry. The resolution comes through Marcus's soft-spoken command, "You really don't want to do that." His words carry the weight of absolute certainty, not bravado. When he says, "Drop it and we all go home," he's offering mercy from a position of complete control. This is the voice of someone who has been in far worse situations and knows exactly how this will end if the leader makes the wrong choice. It's not a threat, but a final chance at a peaceful resolution. The sound of the knife clattering to the pavement serves as the perfect punctuation to the scene. It's an admission of defeat, but also a wise choice that prevents further violence. Marcus's influence is so complete that he doesn't need to touch the leader. His presence and demonstrated capabilities are enough to end the confrontation. This resolution shows that true power often lies not in what you do, but in what you choose not to do when you have the upper hand. Later that night, Marcus sat on his porch, Max's head in his lap. He'd called in an anonymous tip to the police about the gang, knowing they'd find enough evidence in their phones and belongings to connect them to other hate crimes in the area. He looked at his daughter's picture again, thinking about the world she would grow up in. Violence wasn't the answer. His years of service had taught him that. But sometimes standing up to hatred required showing strength. He scratched Max behind the ears, grateful for the quiet evening and the skills he hoped he'd never have to use again.